right. Well, welcome to our psychological health talks. Welcome to our psychological health talks. Today's topic is the ingredients of a mature love. Now, I want to do a couple of disclaimers as we get started here. First of all, one of the things that the ingredients of mature love implies intentionally is that if you think that you have arrived at a mature love, you're wrong. It's an ongoing process. There is no end goal to a mature love. Instead, what there is a constant series of adjustments. And there are elements of the way we approach it that allow us to make those adjustments as life unfolds and we are with an individual and developing a mature love with them for the long haul. Now we're going to focus today primarily on the kind of love that we're thinking about when we're talking about a long-term, committed, romantic relationship. There are other types of mature loves that are similar to this, but not quite the same. So we'll be looking here at the couples relationships and taking the time to go through that. That doesn't mean that there are specific things that we are going to be able to accomplish today, but more general approaches to thinking about how we are put together when we are becoming a couple and maintaining that consistent connection over a long period of time. So it's dynamic, it's focused on the relationship one-on-one with another individual over a long period of time. Because it's a couple's relationship, there is a dimension of sexuality to it quite frequently, especially if we look at sexuality as more than intercourse, but as that whole range of attraction that occurs on the physical level. So there are three different aspects to the ingredients of a mature love that we're going to talk about today. You could probably add additional subcategories to each of them, but we want to really focus on these three different aspects as kind of the anchors that allow us to have a long-term relationship. So let's start with taking a look at that it develops in phases. And when we talk about that, I don't want you to think of it as we get to phase one. When phase one is complete, then we go to phase two. When that's complete, we go to phase three. But rather that phase one then eventually matures into an ability to move into phase two, but phase one is still a part of that whole process. And phase one and phase two allows us to move into phase three. So we're not talking about distinct time periods. We're not even talking about completely distinct interactions. We're talking about the development of a mature love. In much the same way, by analogy, we look at the development of other aspects of human behavior. A child or a newborn infant has to eventually be able to control their muscles enough that they can walk upright and be able to then guide their fine motor skills to be able to write. All of those things don't mean that the earlier skills are lost. They are added to as the individual develops and matures. That's the process that I want to propose as the process that we can understand how a mature love develops. So the first phase is called the honeymoon phase. This is the time when two individuals are meeting and are finding themselves attracted to each other. Now, it's an exciting time. It's a time when individuals feel like they've connected with somebody on a very deep level. There's an intensity to it. It's also the part of the mature love that is the most common part that you see told in stories and songs. So if you're watching a romantic movie or reading a romantic novel or listening to romantic songs, much of it is trying to describe the excitement of the honeymoon phase. This is a time when people feel like they're connected with each other physically, emotionally, oftentimes spiritually. It feels like they've found their soulmate, the person that in some way feels like it completes them. It's an important time in any relationship. It is also not sufficient to have a long-term mature love, but like those early abilities of a child to control their muscles enough to be able to stand up and then take their first steps, this honeymoon phase is that time when the relationship begins to coalesce, and we make a very important decision at this point if this relationship is to mature. And that is that I'm now going to be able to choose to say, I want to be with this person, rather than keep my options open so that I could be with any one of 1,000 different people. And it is important to recognize that this honeymoon phase is in many ways limiting my choices. And I'm limiting my choices to this individual because this is the individual that I'm going to choose to invest my time and energy and myself into. Now, at this point, we see some things that start to emerge. Many times what we see is that individuals at this point are, they find themselves thinking, okay, I'm complete with this person. So there's a focus on all the ways that these two individuals are similar. They might find themselves dressing in similar ways. They might find themselves completing each other's sentences. They might find themselves always wishing that they had more time together. This begins to form the glue of the relationship. And it's something that, while the intensity doesn't last throughout the entirety of the relationship, it's something that in a mature relationship, individuals come back to over and over and over again. There's a sense in which they can see that their life is richer and fuller and more complete when they are able to join together in this way. So the honeymoon phase is an interesting phase. Now, there are a couple of kind of unusual things that we have discovered about this. There's a group called HeartMath that has been investigating the energy levels that are coming off of our bodies. One of the things that we know is that the chemical reactions in our cells produce an electrical charge, and that electrical charge can be picked up and measured. One of the most common places that's measured is in an EEG, an electroencephalograph. They put a harness on your head, and they're able to detect the energy from brain waves as your brain does different activities. Well, it turns out that the heart also sends out energy pulses, and the people at HeartMath started to look at the energy that comes out of the heart, which is actually stronger than the energy that comes out of our brains. And we can measure that heart energy 15 feet outside of our body. So that means that my energy is emanating out beyond the confines of my skin, and you can measure the energy of my heartbeat 15 feet out. Now, what it turns out happens is that when we meet some people, and we feel like we've made a connection with them. We actually, if we're within 30 feet, my 15 feet and their 15 feet, our heartbeats tend to synchronize over time. That's likely what happens, and on a very physiological level, during this honeymoon phase when we're with the partner that we choose. Our heartbeats start to synchronize when we're together, and that makes us feel even more connected. Now, it's probable that when we meet somebody that we consider toxic, we also are interacting with their heartbeat, but somehow those rhythms are off, and that creates for us a sense that this person somehow is not a person that I want to be with. That's a different topic and for a different time. But that heartbeat synchronization is one of the ways that we find ourselves connecting during this honeymoon phase. Now, this is often also the time when the sexual relationship is the most intense because it's new, it really feels like an exciting experience, and it is something that as the sexual experience changes over time, people often miss. And one of the reasons why somebody might choose to be unfaithful is that they're looking for the excitement of that early connection in a new relationship. There are problems with that because then the relationship doesn't mature, and other aspects of this mature love are lost because the individual has moved on looking for the pleasure of an intense sexual relationship rather than letting the other aspects of a mature love really develop. So the second phase then is a phase in which we now begin to add to that sense of connectedness and begin to recognize more fully that there are differences in who we are, so that the relationship does not eliminate our differences, but has the opportunity for us to both accept the differences in the other person and to feel more fully accepted in ourselves. Unfortunately, the early experience of entering into this phase is marked by a higher level of conflict in the relationship, as each individual begins to try to make a play for becoming the person who is getting all of their needs filled by the other person, even though that other person may not be able to do that because there are actually different people. And so there's conflict about who we are, what we are, whether or not we can fully accept this individual with their strengths and their weaknesses. Now, this is an important time. It's a time when we move through this, we are beginning to feel like there's something unique about this relationship. In this time frame, the individual begins to be able to see or begins to be able to experience that they have some value and worth beyond needing to be the perfect person. So again, when we look at the movies and their portrayal of this romantic love early on, what we often see is the individual is feeling like they need to be perfect in order to be accepted. And we even see this reflected in the language, you're perfect for me, or you complete me, or whatever. That's not a fully mature love. The fully mature love accepts the differences in the person, even though they are not necessarily ideal qualities. And that becomes important because, as it turns out, we age, we lose our physical attractiveness over time. We change over time, and this acceptance of each other as we are and as the changes occur provides us stability that is very important. And so now we see this dimension of the relationship in which we feel like we're really connected to this person, and this dimension of the relationship in which we feel like this person accepts me for who I am, all of who I am, even the parts of myself that I see are shortcomings. Now, it is the case that in these early arguments, and in many of the arguments that go on throughout a relationship, one of the underlying factors of the argument is the secret fear that each person holds that somehow I'm not going to be good enough for my partner. And most significant arguments, that's really the underlying issue. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be good enough for my partner. I might react to that by then turning that around and saying my partner isn't good enough for me. And now we have these complaints that go back and forth. The resolution isn't that we now have a perfectly equally balanced division of labor, or this person has now changed and they now complete me and do everything that I want. The resolution is that we can be different, and we can be an individual who has both strengths and weaknesses, and my partner accepts me for who I am, maybe even helps me to be able to develop myself in a way that I can accommodate some of my weaknesses better, maybe even helps me to become a better person as part of this whole journey together. And that we can do that for each other and with each other as part of the way that we are developing and maturing in our love. The third phase is what kind of begins to draw this all together. And that is that, first of all, if you think that at the beginning of a relationship, you can look into the future and predict how it's going to go, you're going to be wrong. Because life is going to bring to us all kinds of challenges, difficulties, defeats, victories, changes in our path that we don't expect. What happens with couples that are able to endure all of that and actually emerge from all of that stronger together is something that we talked a little bit about in our last session when we were talking about the stress management for the real world. And that is a couple that has a mature love begins to be able to see a meaning and a purpose that's shared, a sense of being able to be connected in common values, and to be able to look ahead and say, we don't know how we're going to get there, but we're both aimed toward the same place. So think about it. You start off with a relationship, and you're beginning to get the sense that you're really connected. You feel like you're somehow completing each other. You move from there into being able to understand and recognize the strengths and weaknesses in your partner. You see that they can see the strengths and weaknesses in you, and you're moving into that place where you're more and more accepting of each other and willing to be fully committed to each other, even in the areas that are difficult. And part of what you're doing is you're beginning to then say, okay, we can now look ahead and we share values, and that makes it worth putting the time, worth putting the effort into really being able to make this relationship work. Now, it is the case that a mature relationship is a lot of work. You will have to make adjustments. So you get together, you're going through your honeymoon phase, you begin to accept each other, you maybe have kids together, and as the kids are growing up, you have this challenge of how do we become parents together? What are the values that we want to share in the way that we approach our parenting? What are the differences that we have in our parenting styles, and how can we come together with those differences in the service of making sure that our kids become fully developed and well-rounded? We develop our careers and are needing to balance the focus on being successful in whatever work we do and whatever financial gains we are making. How do we balance that with spending time with family and paying attention to the things and the people that are most important to us? How do we balance having friendships? All of that begins to coalesce as we begin to say, okay, we share values together. We have a common meaning and purpose. Now our kids are grown and moving out of the house. We still have a common sense of values. We still have a common sense of purpose. And part of that requires that we talk about those bigger issues as part of our relationship. What kind of life do we want to form together? How do we accommodate the different goals that each one has within continuing to have similar and shared values? How do we begin to make decisions that allow us to keep moving towards those shared values even when unexpected things happen? When there's a setback financially, or somebody gets sick, or somebody has some other challenge in their life, how do those shared values help to guide us? It is in those moments that all of this coalesces and our relationship becomes strong and secure. So that that ability to talk about that and focus on that and recognize that we share a common sense of what's important, that's part of what gives us the opportunity to fully mature. Now, that doesn't mean that we never have a honeymoon period. In fact, those honeymoon periods have now probably changed a little bit. And it isn't simply that we are excited and intense with each other, but there's a sense of feeling like with this individual, I can be comfortable, I can be at peace, I can admire and appreciate them for who they are, I can recognize who they are, and that makes me feel like it's a we, not a me. In the midst of that, I'm more and more able to recognize that my hurts, my pains, my partner's hurts and pains, they are part of how we have come together. Now, one of the skills that this requires is the ability to not feel like I have to control everything. And in fact, what we are focused on trying to control is very specific. We are focused on trying to control that we together are trying to work toward sharing values, sharing purpose, moving in the same direction. That means that I don't control every single minute aspect. If I have to make my partner do what I want her to do or what I want him to do, that's going to rip apart that sense of being a we. Instead, what I want to do is stay focused with my partner on where we are headed together. And that's the thing that we try to control, that we are making the same effort to go to the same goals, to accomplish the same values in the way that we live, rather than being an individual who feels like I have to control everything or my partner has to do everything that I want. As we do that, the relationship matures. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is always rosy, and in fact, part of what the value of a mature relationship is that it gives me the strength, gives us the strength to face the difficult things in life, because it's not something that I have to do alone. It's something that I do with another individual. It is the case that means that inevitably, if this relationship lasts a lifetime, inevitably when a partner dies, there's a great deal of grief, because that's the cost. If I am not going to feel any grief, then I can't really love this person. If I really love this person, I will grieve the loss of that person if it happens, when it happens. That doesn't mean that the love was invalid. That doesn't mean the end of life. It means that there's an opportunity to really appreciate the value and the connection that we've had throughout this entire time. So as you look at your relationship, pay attention to these three key aspects. There does need to be honeymoon periods, senses of connection that you regularly go back to. Take time to appreciate what it is that draws you together. Take time to appreciate the opportunities you have to make your partner happy. Also take time to make sure that you recognize that the relationship isn't about being perfect. It's about fully accepting each other, warts and all, imperfections as well as strong qualities, and see the whole picture, the whole person that you're making a connection with. And finally, always make sure that you together are working on and approaching your time together in a shared value, a shared goal that makes you into a we, not just two I's. If you do that, your relationship can mature in the remarkable ways that are going to be unique to you, but that will allow you to have a relationship that is truly of value. So we'll be talking next week a little bit more on some specific skills that you can use to enhance these qualities in what I call mindfulness for couples, and why that approach will be very valuable in making sure that you can build on what we've talked about today. Thanks. Tune in next week and make sure that you get an opportunity to join us again.